Have you ever felt like you're working harder than ever, yet accomplishing less than you should? You're not alone. In a world where distractions arrive every 11 minutes, where notifications compete for your attention like hungry wolves, and where the very tools designed to make us more productive have become the greatest thieves of our focus, we've lost something profound. We've lost our ability to think deeply, to create meaningfully, and to experience the pure satisfaction that comes from complete immersion in challenging work. But what if I told you there's a way back? What if you could transform from someone who barely scratches the surface of their potential into someone who regularly enters states of such profound focus that time disappears, creativity flows effortlessly, and your best work emerges almost magically? This is not fantasy. This is the reality of deep work evolution. And today, you're going to learn exactly how to achieve it. Before we begin, please subscribe to this channel so you won't miss future helpful audiobooks like this one. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments and let me know which topics you'd like to explore next. I'm committed to creating audiobook content based on your interests and feedback. Deep work. Evolution. Going beyond surface productivity to flow state mastery. Chapter 1. The Crisis of Shallow Living. We live in an age of unprecedented distraction. Every day, the average knowledge worker loses 1 hour and 18 minutes to interruptions and distractions. That's nearly 340 hours per year, the equivalent of more than 8 full work weeks, simply vanished into the void of fractured attention. American businesses hemorrhage $650 billion annually because of distracted employees. That's not a typo. $650 billion lost to the constant pinging, buzzing, and flashing of our digital age. But the cost isn't just financial, it's deeply personal. Research from the University of California reveals a sobering truth. When you're interrupted during a task, it takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to fully regain your focus. Think about that for a moment. If you're interrupted just 3 times in an hour, you've essentially lost that entire hour to the cognitive effort of refocusing. You haven't just lost time, you've lost the quality of your thinking, the depth of your creativity, and the satisfaction of meaningful progress. Dr. Gloria Mark, a professor who has dedicated her career to studying workplace distraction, discovered that the average worker is interrupted every 11 minutes. 11 minutes. That's barely enough time to warm up to a complex problem, let alone solve it. And here's the cruel irony. We don't just suffer from external interruptions. We've become our own worst enemies. 50% of employees admit they regularly distract themselves with their phones. 75% of Americans cite digital notifications as their primary reason for inability to focus at work. This isn't just about productivity metrics or corporate profits. This is about the quality of your life, the depth of your experience, and the realization of your potential. When was the last time you worked on something so absorbing that you completely lost track of time? When did you last finish a day feeling genuinely proud of what you accomplished, rather than exhausted from constantly switching between shallow tasks? For most people, those moments are rare. They've become exceptions rather than the norm. The problem runs deeper than simple distraction. We're experiencing what psychologists call attention residue, a phenomenon first identified by business professor Dr. Sophie Leroy. When you switch from one task to another, your attention doesn't immediately follow. A residue of your attention remains stuck, thinking about the original task. This residue gets especially thick if your work was unbounded and of low intensity before you switched. But even if you finish a task before moving on, your attention remains divided for a while. Dr. Leroy's research revealed something disturbing. When people anticipate time pressure on an interrupted task, they experience significantly more attention residue and perform worse on their current task. They don't process information as carefully. They miss errors. When asked to make decisions based on recalled information, they're less likely to identify optimal solutions. The brain, quite literally, struggles to let go of unfinished business. This creates a vicious cycle. Distractions lead to productivity loss, which leads to longer workdays, which leads to frustration and stress, which leads to lack of engagement and motivation, which leads to more vulnerability to distraction. 34% of employees report liking their jobs less when working in a distracting environment. When people compensate for interruptions by working faster, they experience more stress, higher pressure, and greater levels of frustration. The research is unambiguous. Constantly fielding emails has the same deleterious effect on performance as missing an entire night's sleep. Workplace distractions even degrade employee IQ scores. We're not just losing time, we're losing cognitive capacity, emotional resilience, and professional satisfaction. But there's another cost we rarely discuss: the loss of our capacity for deep thinking itself. When you never give your brain extended periods of uninterrupted focus, you don't just become bad at focusing, you actually rewire your neural pathways to prefer distraction. Your brain becomes addicted to novelty, to the quick hit of dopamine from a new notification, to the easy satisfaction of shallow tasks that require minimal cognitive effort. This addiction isn't accidental. The technologies that dominate our lives, from social media platforms to smartphone apps, were specifically engineered to be addictive. They employ intermittent positive reinforcement, the same psychological principle used in slot machines. A like here, a notification there, just enough reward to keep you checking, scrolling, refreshing. These aren't neutral tools. They're carefully designed to capture and monetize your attention. Cal Newport, a computer science professor at Georgetown University, calls this the any benefit approach to technology adoption. We justify using a tool if we can identify any possible benefit to its use, or anything we might possibly miss out on if we don't use it. This low bar for adoption means we fill our lives with technologies that offer minor conveniences while imposing major costs on our attention and autonomy. The result is what Newport describes as a state of persistent semi-distraction. You're never fully present with any task. Part of your mind is always wondering what's happening on your phone, in your inbox, on social media. You've trained yourself to expect interruption, to crave distraction, to feel uncomfortable with extended periods of focus. This isn't just about work. It's about the texture of your conscious experience. When you live in a state of persistent semi-distraction, you never fully experience anything. You're at dinner with friends, but part of your attention is on your phone. You're reading a book, but you can't make it through more than a few pages without checking something else. You're supposed to be relaxing, but you feel anxious, restless, unable to simply be present. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who spent decades studying optimal experience, identified something he called flow state, a condition of complete absorption in an activity. In flow, you lose track of time, your sense of self fades away, and you perform at your highest level with seemingly effortless ease. Athletes call it being in the zone. Artists describe it as inspiration. But here's the critical insight. You cannot experience flow in a state of distraction. Flow requires sustained attention, clear goals, and immediate feedback. It requires the very conditions that our modern world systematically destroys. The tragedy is that many people have forgotten what deep focus even feels like. They've spent so many years in a state of fractured attention that they've normalized it. They think this scattered, anxious, perpetually interrupted state is simply how modern life works. They've lost the reference point for what's possible when you give your full attention to challenging work. But it doesn't have to be this way. The capacity for deep focus, for complete absorption, for flow state mastery, isn't a genetic gift bestowed on the lucky few. It's a skill that can be developed through deliberate practice. It's a state that can be cultivated through intentional design of your environment, your habits, and your relationship with technology. The first step is recognizing the problem in its full scope. This isn't about becoming slightly more productive. This is about reclaiming your cognitive sovereignty, about refusing to let algorithms and notifications control your attention, about rediscovering your capacity for deep thought and meaningful work. Every moment you spend in shallow distraction is a moment stolen from your potential. Every interruption you allow is a cognitive cost you'll pay in degraded performance and diminished satisfaction. Every time you choose the easy dopamine hit of a notification over the hard work of sustained focus, you're reinforcing neural pathways that make deep work harder. But the reverse is also true. Every moment you spend in deep focus strengthens your capacity for concentration. Every interruption you successfully resist builds your mental resilience. Every time you choose depth over shallowness, you're rewiring your brain to prefer the sustained attention that enables your best work. The question isn't whether deep work is possible in the modern world. The question is whether you're willing to make the choices necessary to achieve it. Are you willing to examine your habits honestly? Are you willing to challenge the cultural narrative that says you must be constantly available, perpetually responsive, always connected? Are you willing to prioritize depth over breadth, quality over quantity, meaning over busyness? The path forward requires understanding not just the problem, but the solution. It requires knowledge of how your brain actually works, how focus is built, how flow states emerge, and how mastery develops. It requires practical strategies for protecting your attention, managing your environment, and structuring your time. Most importantly, it requires a fundamental shift in how you think about work itself. Deep work isn't just a technique or a productivity hack. It's a philosophy of life. It's a commitment to doing fewer things, but doing them with complete attention and genuine excellence. It's a recognition that your time and attention are your most precious resources, and that how you spend them determines the quality of your life and work. This is what we're going to explore together: how to move beyond the crisis of shallow living, how to reclaim your capacity for deep focus, and how to master the flow states that enable your most meaningful contributions. The journey begins with understanding what deep work really is and why it matters more than ever in our distracted age. Chapter 2: The Science of Deep Work and Flow. To understand how to achieve deep work and flow states, we need to understand what's happening in your brain when you're truly focused versus when you're distracted. This isn't abstract theory. This is practical neuroscience that can transform how you approach your most important work. Your brain generates electrical activity that can be measured in waves, each associated with different mental states. When you're awake and actively thinking, your brain produces beta waves, oscillating between 13 and 30 Hz. This is your normal waking consciousness, characterized by logical thinking, active conversation, and external focus. Beta is essential for daily functioning, but it's not the state where your best work emerges. When you begin to relax and turn your attention inward, your brain shifts into alpha waves, oscillating between 8 and 12 Hz. Alpha represents a state of relaxed awareness, the bridge between active thinking and deeper consciousness. Creative individuals show higher alpha wave activity, particularly when solving creative problems. This is the state where insights begin to emerge, where your mind makes unexpected connections. As you move deeper into focused work, your brain can access theta waves, oscillating between 4 and 8 Hz. Theta is associated with deep relaxation, creativity, meditation, and the dream state. This is where your subconscious mind becomes accessible, where intuition flows, where breakthrough insights occur. Many people experience theta briefly while falling asleep or just waking up. Those liminal moments when the boundary between conscious and unconscious thinking dissolves. At the highest end of the spectrum, we find gamma waves, oscillating between 30 and 140 Hz. Gamma is involved in higher aspects of cognition, improved working memory, and better concentration. It's associated with states of peak performance, deep insight, and what some describe as transcendent experience. Highly experienced meditators can maintain gamma states for extended periods, experiencing what researchers describe as heightened awareness and cognitive integration. Here's where it gets fascinating. When you achieve true flow state, something remarkable happens in your brain. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for self-monitoring, critical thinking, and sense of time, temporarily quiets down. This phenomenon, called transient hypofrontality, allows for uninhibited cognitive performance and creativity. You stop second-guessing yourself. You stop worrying about how you're performing. You stop being aware of time passing. You become the activity itself. Research shows that executives who work in flow states are 500% more productive than in their normal working state. 500%. That's not a marginal improvement. That's a complete transformation in what's possible when you achieve optimal brain states. But how do you actually get there? This is where the work of Cal Newport becomes essential. Newport defines deep work as professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to their limit. These efforts create new value, improve your skill, and are hard to replicate. Deep work is characterized by 3 essential elements. First, it requires your full attention on a single cognitively demanding task. You're not checking email while writing. You're not glancing at your phone while coding. You're not mentally rehearsing your to-do list while designing. You're fully present with one challenging activity. Second, deep work pushes you to the edge of your current abilities. It's not busy work. It's not routine tasks you could do on autopilot. It's work that requires you to stretch, to struggle, to engage your highest cognitive capacities. This is where growth happens, where skills develop, where mastery emerges. Third, deep work creates lasting value. Whether you're writing a book, solving a complex problem, designing a new product, or mastering a skill, deep work produces outcomes that matter. It's the opposite of shallow work, those logistical tasks and minor decisions that fill most people's days but create minimal lasting value. The relationship between deep work and flow is crucial to understand. Deep work creates the conditions necessary for flow to emerge, but they're not identical. Deep work is the practice, the discipline, the deliberate effort to maintain focused attention on demanding tasks. Flow is the state that can arise from this practice, the experience of effortless concentration and peak performance. Think of deep work as the gateway to flow. When you consistently engage in deep work, you're training your brain to enter and sustain focused states. You're building the neural pathways that support extended concentration. You're developing the mental stamina required for complex cognitive work. Over time, these deep work sessions become progressively easier to initiate and maintain, and flow states become more accessible. The neuroscience supports this progression. When you focus intensely on a specific skill or task, you're forcing relevant neural circuits to fire repeatedly in isolation. This triggers a process called myelination, where your brain wraps layers of myelin around the neuron's axons. Myelin acts like insulation on a wire, allowing neural signals to travel faster and with less energy loss. The more you practice focused attention on demanding tasks, the thicker this myelin sheath becomes, making those neural pathways progressively more efficient. This is why deeply focused practice sessions lead to better skill acquisition than distracted, fragmented learning. When you practice with full attention, you're not just logging hours, you're actually changing the physical structure of your brain, creating the neural infrastructure that supports higher-level performance. But here's the challenge. Your brain doesn't naturally prefer deep work. In fact, it's wired to resist it. Your brain evolved to be highly responsive to novel stimuli, to notice changes in your environment, to be alert to potential threats or opportunities. This made perfect sense in ancestral environments where survival depended on constant vigilance. In the modern world, these same tendencies make you vulnerable to every notification, every interruption, every shiny new distraction. This is where the concept of attention residue becomes critically important. Remember Dr. Sophie Leroy's research. When you switch tasks, your attention doesn't immediately follow. A residue remains with the prior task, especially if it was left unfinished. This residue impairs your performance on the new task, reducing both quality and efficiency. The implications are profound. Every time you check your phone during a deep work session, you're not just losing the minute it takes to glance at the screen. You're creating attention residue that will degrade your focus for the next 20+ minutes. Every time you respond to a non-urgent email, every time you switch to a different project midstream, you're paying a significant cognitive cost. The solution isn't just trying harder to focus. It's understanding that your brain requires specific conditions to achieve and maintain deep work states. First, you need extended blocks of uninterrupted time. Research suggests that entering flow requires at least 15 to 20 minutes of uninterrupted focus, and maintaining it requires much longer periods. If you're being interrupted every 11 minutes, you'll never reach the cognitive states where your best work emerges. Second, you need appropriately challenging tasks. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's research on flow identified a crucial factor: the challenge-skills balance. Flow occurs when the challenge of a task is slightly beyond your current skill level, stretching you without overwhelming you. If a task is too easy, you experience boredom. If it's too difficult, you experience anxiety. The sweet spot is that narrow channel where difficulty and ability align, where you're pushed to your edge without being pushed over it. Third, you need clear goals and immediate feedback. Your brain needs to know what it's trying to accomplish and whether it's making progress. This doesn't mean you need someone standing over your shoulder. It means the work itself should provide feedback. When you're writing, you see the words appearing on the page. When you're coding, you can test whether your program works. When you're designing, you can see whether your solution addresses the problem. Fourth, you need to minimize decision fatigue. Every decision, no matter how small, consumes mental energy. This is why successful people often implement strict routines around their deep work. They work in the same place, at the same time, using the same rituals to signal to their brain that it's time to focus. These routines conserve mental energy for the work itself, rather than wasting it on logistics. The science reveals another crucial insight. Rest is not optional for deep work. Your brain requires recovery periods to process information, consolidate learning, and restore the cognitive resources necessary for intense focus. Research on deliberate practice, the method used by experts to develop mastery, shows clear limits on how much high-intensity cognitive work is sustainable. Anders Ericsson, the psychologist who pioneered research on deliberate practice, found that expert musicians could only sustain about 4 to 5 hours of truly intense practice per day. Beginners were limited to 15 to 20 minutes of full concentration before needing a break. The key isn't just practicing more, it's practicing with complete focus during those limited hours when your brain is capable of that level of intensity, then resting completely to allow for recovery and consolidation. This is why the Pomodoro technique, developed by Francesco Cirillo, has proven so effective for many people. The basic method involves working in focused 25-minute intervals called Pomodoros, separated by 5-minute breaks. After 4 Pomodoros, you take a longer 15 to 30-minute break. This structure honors both the brain's capacity for intense focus and its need for recovery. Recent research has validated this approach. A meta-analysis found that time-structured Pomodoro interventions consistently improved focus, reduced mental fatigue, and enhanced sustained task performance, outperforming self-paced breaks. Students following the Pomodoro technique showed higher levels of concentration and motivation compared to control groups, despite studying for shorter total durations. The neuroscience also explains why certain environmental factors support or hinder deep work. Noise, particularly intermittent and unpredictable noise, forces your brain to constantly assess whether the sound represents something requiring attention. This background monitoring drains cognitive resources and prevents full immersion in your work. Conversely, consistent background sounds, like white noise or instrumental music, can actually support focus by masking more distracting environmental sounds. Lighting matters too. Natural light, particularly morning light, helps regulate your circadian rhythm and improves cognitive performance. Blue light from screens, especially in the evening, disrupts this rhythm and can impair both the quality of your sleep and your cognitive function the next day. Temperature affects cognition as well. Research suggests that slightly cool environments, around 68 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, support optimal cognitive performance. When you're too warm, your body diverts resources to cooling, reducing what's available for thinking. Understanding the science of deep work and flow isn't just intellectually interesting. It provides a foundation for practical strategies that actually work because they align with how your brain functions. You can't hack biology. You can't trick your brain into performing at its peak while ignoring its fundamental requirements. But when you work with your neurobiology rather than against it, remarkable transformations become possible. The path to flow state mastery isn't about finding some secret technique or downloading the right app. It's about creating the conditions where your brain naturally enters and sustains the states associated with peak performance. It's about building the neural infrastructure through consistent practice. It's about protecting your attention from the forces that fragment it. It's about respecting your brain's needs for both intensity and recovery. This scientific understanding gives us the foundation we need. Now we can build on it with practical strategies for actually achieving deep work in the real world, despite all the obstacles and distractions of modern life. That's what we'll explore next: the concrete methods for cultivating deep work and progressing toward flow state mastery. Chapter 3: The 4 Philosophies of Deep Work. Understanding the science of deep work is crucial, but implementing it requires choosing an approach that fits your life, your work, and your constraints. Cal Newport identified 4 distinct philosophies for scheduling deep work, each with its own strengths and appropriate contexts. Choosing the wrong philosophy for your situation is like wearing the wrong shoes for a marathon. You'll struggle unnecessarily, and you might conclude that deep work simply doesn't work for you, when really, you just chose the wrong approach. The first philosophy is the monastic approach. This involves maximizing deep work by eliminating or minimizing shallow obligations entirely. Monastic deep workers ruthlessly protect their time and attention by creating as much distance as possible from the sources of distraction. They might delete their social media accounts, severely limit email checking to once or twice a day, or even relocate to quiet environments far from the demands of everyday life. Famous examples include psychologist Carl Jung, who built a retreat in the woods specifically for deep thinking, and science fiction writer Neil Stephenson, who simply doesn't maintain a public email address. Bill Gates famously takes think weeks twice a year, retreating to an isolated cabin with nothing but books and a laptop to think deeply about the future of technology. The monastic philosophy works brilliantly if your professional success depends primarily on doing one thing extraordinarily well, and if you have the autonomy to structure your time without frequent collaborative obligations. If you're a novelist, a researcher working on a long-term project, or an artist creating major works, the monastic approach might be ideal. But for most people, the monastic philosophy is impractical. If your job requires regular collaboration, client interaction, or managing a team, you can't simply disappear for days or weeks at a time. If you're building a business, you need to be responsive to opportunities and challenges. If you have family obligations, you can't just retreat to a cabin in the woods. This brings us to the second philosophy, the bimodal approach. Bimodal deep workers divide their time into clearly defined periods. During some periods, they act monastically, protecting their time intensely and working with complete focus. During other periods, they're open to collaboration, meetings, emails, and the other demands of modern work life. The key to the bimodal philosophy is that the deep work periods must be substantial enough to reach maximum cognitive intensity. Newport suggests that a minimum unit for bimodal deep work should be at least 1 full day. You might dedicate certain days of the week entirely to deep work, like spending Mondays and Fridays on collaborative tasks while reserving Tuesday through Thursday for deep work. Or you might alternate entire weeks, spending 1 week in deep work mode and the next in collaborative mode. Psychologist and author Adam Grant provides an excellent example of the bimodal approach. He schedules his teaching and administrative responsibilities intensively during the fall semester, then dedicates extended periods to research and writing. During his deep work periods, he might disappear completely, not checking email or taking meetings. During his collaborative periods, he's highly engaged with students and colleagues. The bimodal philosophy works well if you have some control over your schedule, and your work includes both collaborative and individual components. It requires the discipline to actually protect your deep work periods from intrusion, but it offers more flexibility than the monastic approach. The third philosophy, and perhaps the most accessible for most people, is the rhythmic approach. Rhythmic deep workers create a regular habit of deep work sessions at the same time each day or week. The goal is to make deep work so routine that it becomes automatic, requiring minimal willpower to initiate. The most common rhythmic approach is dedicating the first few hours of each workday to deep work before opening email or taking meetings. Many successful writers, for example, write every morning from 6 to 9 before the demands of the day intrude. The regularity of the schedule makes it easier to maintain because you're not constantly negotiating with yourself about when to do deep work. You just do it at the appointed time. The rhythmic philosophy has several advantages. First, it's sustainable. Because deep work is scheduled regularly, rather than in intense bursts, you can maintain the practice indefinitely without burnout. Second, it's adaptable. You can start with just 1 or 2 hours a day and gradually increase as your capacity for sustained focus develops. Third, it fits into most professional lives without requiring radical changes to your job or lifestyle. The rhythmic approach does require defending your scheduled deep work time from the constant pressure to be responsive and available. This means setting clear boundaries, communicating them to colleagues and clients, and sticking to them even when it feels uncomfortable. But for most people, this is far more achievable than the radical transformations required by monastic or bimodal approaches. The fourth philosophy is the journalistic approach, named for journalists who train themselves to shift into deep work mode whenever they had free time, even if just for short periods. Journalistic deep workers are opportunistic, taking advantage of whatever time becomes available to work with intense focus. This might sound ideal, the ability to enter deep work mode at a moment's notice, but it's actually the most difficult philosophy to execute successfully. Why? Because it requires the mental discipline to context switch quickly and completely, which most people haven't developed. Remember attention residue. Switching contexts comes with a cognitive cost. Journalists developed this skill through years of practice, learning to write intensively on deadline regardless of circumstances. For most people, the journalistic approach fails because they overestimate their ability to shift into deep work mode quickly and underestimate the cognitive cost of frequent context switching. If you haven't yet built a strong deep work practice through one of the other philosophies, attempting the journalistic approach will likely lead to frustration and shallow work disguised as deep work. However, the journalistic philosophy can work well for experienced deep workers who have already built strong focusing abilities. If you've spent months or years practicing one of the other approaches, you might gradually develop the capacity to shift into deep work mode more quickly and opportunistically. Choosing the right philosophy is crucial, but it's not a permanent decision. You might start with the rhythmic approach to build your focusing capacity, then gradually experiment with bimodal scheduling as you gain more control over your calendar. The key is starting with something achievable given your current constraints, rather than attempting an ideal that sets you up for failure. Beyond choosing a philosophy, successful deep work requires what Newport calls rituals and routines. These are the specific habits and practices you build around your deep work to support it. The most successful deep workers don't rely on willpower alone. They create systems that make deep work the path of least resistance. Your ritual might include where you work. Some people need complete silence in a private office. Others work well in coffee shops where the ambient noise masks more distracting sounds. Some prefer working at home, while others find they need to leave their residence entirely to escape household distractions. There's no universal answer, but you need to identify what works for you and make it consistent. Your ritual should include how you work. Do you need certain tools immediately available? Do you work better standing or sitting? Do you prefer natural light, or can you work anywhere? Do you need to eliminate all technology except what's essential for the task? Or can you trust yourself not to check distracting websites? Be honest about your vulnerabilities and design your environment accordingly. Your ritual must include how you support your work. The brain requires fuel. Many people find that having water, coffee, or healthy snacks readily available helps them maintain focus for extended periods. Others discover that a brief walk before a deep work session helps them transition into the right mental state. Some people meditate for a few minutes to clear their mind before beginning. Perhaps most importantly, your ritual should include how you measure your work. Having a clear metric for your deep work sessions helps maintain motivation and provides feedback on your progress. This might be pages written, problems solved, hours of sustained focus, or any other measure that's meaningful for your work. The key is having some way to track whether your deep work sessions are actually productive. One powerful ritual is what Newport calls the shut-down complete practice. At the end of your workday, you do a final review of your email, your task list, and your calendar for the next day. You make a rough plan for tomorrow's deep work. Then you say, either literally or metaphorically, shut down complete. This ritual signals to your brain that work is over, allowing you to actually relax and recover, rather than continuing to think about work during your supposedly free time. The shutdown complete ritual matters because it addresses attention residue from another angle. If you just stop working without any closure, your brain continues to process work concerns in the background, interfering with rest and recovery. By explicitly reviewing everything and planning tomorrow, you give your brain permission to let go. Different people need different rituals, but everyone needs some consistent practice to support their deep work. The legendary architect Frank Lloyd Wright, when faced with a particularly challenging design problem, would often take a walk in nature. The combination of physical movement, exposure to natural beauty, and temporary disengagement from the problem frequently led to breakthrough insights. Novelist Haruki Murakami follows a strict daily routine designed to induce what he calls a mesmerized state. He wakes at 4 a.m., writes for 5 to 6 hours, then runs 10 kilometers or swims 1,500 meters. This routine has become so ingrained that it requires minimal mental effort, allowing him to save his cognitive resources for his writing. The pattern across successful deep workers is clear. They don't leave their practice to chance or rely solely on motivation. They create consistent rituals that make deep work automatic, that cue their brain to enter focused states, that support their cognitive work with the right environmental conditions and recovery practices. This is crucial because willpower is a finite resource. Research on ego depletion shows that every decision, every act of self-control, every resistance to temptation depletes your mental energy. If you have to constantly decide when to do deep work, where to do it, how to do it, you're wasting precious cognitive resources on logistics rather than the work itself. Rituals conserve willpower by making deep work habitual. When you always work in the same place, at the same time, using the same setup, you eliminate decision fatigue. Your brain learns to associate these cues with focused work, making it progressively easier to enter deep work states. The science of habit formation supports this approach. When you consistently perform the same action in the same context, you create strong neurological associations. Eventually, the context itself triggers the behavior without requiring conscious decision-making. This is why elite athletes have pre-performance routines, why surgeons follow strict protocols, why successful writers often have elaborate rituals around their work. Your deep work practice should aim for this same automaticity. You're not trying to force yourself into focus through sheer willpower every single day. You're building a system that makes deep work the default, that supports your brain's natural capacity for focus rather than fighting against it. As you implement your chosen philosophy and build your supporting rituals, pay attention to what actually works for you rather than what should work in theory. Keep notes on which times of day you're most capable of deep focus. Track which environmental factors support or hinder your work. Notice which types of tasks feel most accessible during deep work sessions versus which require different mental states. This self-knowledge is invaluable because it allows you to optimize your practice over time. You might discover that you're naturally more focused in the mornings and should schedule your most demanding deep work then. You might find that certain types of music help you focus while others prove distracting. You might realize that you need a specific warm-up period before you can fully engage with challenging work. The goal isn't to follow someone else's perfect system. The goal is to develop your own sustainable practice, grounded in scientific principles, but adapted to your unique circumstances, constraints, and cognitive patterns. This is how you move from understanding deep work in theory to experiencing it in practice, from knowing you should focus better to actually doing your most important work with complete attention and genuine excellence. With the right philosophy and supporting rituals in place, you're ready to address the next crucial challenge: protecting your deep work from the forces that constantly threaten to fragment your attention. That's what we'll explore in the next chapter: the practical tactics for defending your focus in a world designed to destroy it. Chapter 4: Protecting Attention in a Distracted World. Having a philosophy and rituals for deep work means nothing if you can't protect your practice from the relentless assault of distractions. This is where theory meets reality, where good intentions collide with the actual challenges of modern work and life. The truth is, our world is specifically engineered to fragment your attention. Understanding this isn't pessimism, it's realism. And only by confronting the reality of attention theft can you develop effective defenses. Let's start with the biggest culprit: your smartphone. Research shows that workers spend an average of 2.5 hours per workday using their smartphones for non-work reasons. That's more than 600 hours per year, the equivalent of 15 full work weeks, spent scrolling through social media, checking messages, playing games, and consuming digital content that adds minimal value to your life or work. But the problem isn't just the time directly spent on the phone. It's the constant interruptions that fragment your focus throughout the day. 62% of employees cite phone notifications as their major distraction at work. Every notification, even if you don't immediately respond to it, creates a cognitive pull that degrades your focus. Your brain registers the interruption, wonders what it is, considers whether to check it now or later, and continues to allocate attention to it in the background. The solution isn't simply trying harder to ignore your phone. That approach treats the symptom rather than the cause. The fundamental problem is that your phone is designed to be irresistible. Every app you use employs sophisticated psychological techniques to maximize engagement, which really means maximizing the time you spend looking at the screen. Social media platforms use intermittent variable rewards, the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. You don't know when you'll get a like, a comment, or an interesting post, so you check frequently, hoping for a reward. Email notifications create a sense of urgency around messages that are rarely actually urgent. News apps present information in ways that trigger emotional responses and keep you scrolling for more. Understanding this isn't about moral judgment. The people designing these systems aren't evil. They're responding to business incentives that reward user engagement above all else. But recognizing that your phone is engineered for addiction means you can't rely on willpower alone to resist it. You need strategic defenses. The first line of defense is physical separation. During deep work sessions, your phone should not be in the same room, not on silent, not face down on your desk. In a different room entirely, preferably in a drawer, where retrieving it requires deliberate effort. Research consistently shows that the mere presence of your phone, even when you're not using it, reduces cognitive capacity. Your brain knows the phone is there and allocates resources to resisting the temptation to check it. If your work absolutely requires having your phone nearby, at minimum use the Do Not Disturb function to prevent notifications. Better yet, use app blockers that prevent you from accessing distracting apps during scheduled deep work times. Apps like Freedom, Cold Turkey, or Forest can create artificial barriers that give you the pause necessary to recognize you're about to break your focus. But smartphones aren't the only digital threat to your attention. Email presents an equally pernicious challenge. The average worker checks email 36 times per hour and takes 16 minutes to refocus after handling an email. Think about that arithmetic. If you're checking email even a fraction as frequently, you're essentially guaranteeing that you never achieve deep focus. Email feels urgent because of how we've collectively agreed to use it as a tool for instant, asynchronous communication. But this urgency is largely illusory. Very few emails actually require immediate response. Most could be answered hours or even days later without any real consequence. The problem is that we've trained ourselves and others to expect instant responsiveness. The solution is to fundamentally restructure your relationship with email. Instead of treating it as a task that must be continuously monitored, treat it as a task that gets scheduled time like any other work. Many successful deep workers check email only 2 or 3 times per day, perhaps once in mid-morning, once after lunch, and once before ending the workday. This batching approach dramatically reduces the attention residue created by constant email checking. When you do check email, process it completely, rather than just reading and then returning later. Use the 2-minute rule. If an email can be handled in 2 minutes or less, do it immediately. If it requires more time, add it to your task list and move on. The goal is to empty your inbox during each scheduled email session rather than leaving messages to create ongoing mental clutter. This requires setting clear expectations with colleagues and clients about your email responsiveness. You might add a note to your email signature explaining that you check email at specific times and that urgent matters should be handled differently. Initially, this might feel uncomfortable. People have come to expect immediate responses, but in practice, most people adapt quickly, and many actually respect the boundaries you're setting. Meetings present another major threat to deep work. Research shows that employees attend about 62 meetings per month, with 91% of workers admitting they daydream during meetings. Meetings are among the most apparent examples of lost productivity, yet they continue to proliferate in most organizations. The problem with meetings isn't that all meetings are bad. Strategic planning sessions, creative brainstorming, complex problem solving that requires multiple perspectives. These can be valuable uses of collective time. The problem is meetings that have unclear purposes, that include people who don't need to be there, that could have been handled asynchronously via email or a shared document. Defending your deep work time requires becoming more selective about which meetings you attend and more strategic about how meetings you do attend are conducted. Before accepting a meeting invitation, ask yourself, what is the specific purpose of this meeting? What value do I add to this meeting? What value does this meeting add to my work? If you can't articulate clear answers, consider declining or proposing an alternative approach. For meetings you do attend, advocate for clear agendas, defined start and end times, and explicit outcomes. A meeting without an agenda is likely to meander and consume more time than necessary. A meeting without a defined end time will expand to fill whatever time is available. A meeting without explicit outcomes often requires another meeting to actually make decisions or take action. One powerful technique is to schedule all your meetings on specific days, leaving other days entirely free for deep work. This bimodal approach to meetings means you're not constantly context switching between collaborative and individual work. When it's meeting day, you're fully engaged in collaboration. When it's deep work day, you're fully engaged in focused individual work. Open office environments present yet another challenge. 70% of employees cite interruptions from colleagues as the top distraction preventing them from completing tasks. When you're working in an open space, anyone can approach you at any moment to ask a question, start a conversation, or simply share whatever's on their mind. These interruptions feel innocent because they're brief and social. But remember the research on recovery time after interruption. It takes an average of 23 minutes to regain full focus. If you're being interrupted multiple times per hour, you're never reaching the cognitive states where deep work happens. If you work in an open office, you need clear signals to indicate when you're in deep work mode and shouldn't be interrupted. This might be wearing headphones, even if you're not listening to anything. It might be putting a sign on your desk that says, "Deep work. Please email." It might be simply communicating to your team that when you're facing away from the common area, you're in focus mode. These signals work best when they're backed by organizational culture that respects deep work. If your company culture celebrates constant availability and instant responsiveness, individual attempts to protect focus will face resistance. This is why organizations that care about knowledge work quality increasingly implement policies that protect deep work time for all employees. Some companies designate certain hours as quiet time when interruptions are discouraged and meetings aren't scheduled. Others create dedicated spaces for deep work where people can go when they need to focus without interruption. Still others implement communication norms that reduce the expectation of instant responsiveness. But even in organizations that don't formally support deep work, you can often carve out protected time through clear communication and consistency. If you regularly decline meetings during your deep work hours, if you consistently respond to emails at specific times rather than immediately, If you politely but firmly redirect interruptions during focus time, people learn to respect your boundaries. One technique that helps is what Francesco Cirillo, creator of the Pomodoro technique, calls the inform, negotiate, callback strategy. When someone interrupts you during deep work, you inform them that you're in the middle of focused work. Negotiate a time to discuss their issue after your current work session and promise to call them back at that designated time. This respects both your need for focus and their need for attention. The key is following through. If you promise to call someone back at the end of your work session, actually do it. This builds trust that when you defer interruptions, it's not permanent avoidance. People become much more willing to respect your focus time when they know you'll be responsive at the agreed-upon later time. Another powerful protection strategy is what Cal Newport calls a shutdown ritual. At the end of each workday, you review all your incomplete tasks, look at your calendar for the next day, and make a rough plan for tomorrow's deep work. Then, you symbolically close your work, perhaps by shutting down your computer or writing "Shutdown Complete" in a notebook. This ritual serves multiple purposes. It ensures you haven't left anything critical hanging. It reduces anxiety about forgetting important tasks. Most importantly, it gives your brain permission to stop thinking about work. Without some form of closure, your brain continues processing work concerns during your supposedly free time, preventing genuine rest and recovery. The shutdown ritual also helps you resist the temptation to check work email or messages during evening and weekend hours. Once you've completed your shutdown ritual, you've consciously decided that work is over for the day. Any work thoughts that arise can be acknowledged and dismissed. I'm done for today. If it's important, I'll handle it tomorrow. This boundary between work and non-work time isn't just about work-life balance in some abstract sense. It's about cognitive recovery. Your brain needs extended periods away from work to consolidate learning, process information, and restore the mental resources required for deep work. When you never fully disconnect, you're undermining your capacity for focus during work hours. This brings us to a crucial but often overlooked aspect of protecting attention: the role of boredom. We've become so accustomed to constant stimulation that many people feel uncomfortable with even brief moments of unstructured time. Standing in line? Check your phone. Waiting for a meeting to start? Scroll through social media. Riding the elevator? Read your email. This constant stimulation trains your brain to crave distraction. If you never allow yourself to be bored, you lose the capacity to tolerate the discomfort that comes with difficult cognitive work. Deep work is often uncomfortable, at least initially. It requires pushing through resistance, sitting with uncertainty, struggling with problems that don't have obvious solutions. The antidote is intentionally practicing boredom. Take walks without your phone. Sit in waiting rooms without any device. Commute without podcasts or music. Just be with your thoughts. Notice your environment. Let your mind wander. This isn't wasted time. It's training your brain to be comfortable with the absence of constant stimulation. Research on mind wandering and creativity reveals an interesting paradox. Some of your best insights emerge when you're not actively trying to solve problems. When your brain isn't focused on any particular task, it enters what neuroscientists call the default mode network, a state associated with creative thinking, memory consolidation, and integration of information. This is why solutions to complex problems often arrive in the shower, during walks, or just before sleep. Your conscious mind stops grinding on the problem, allowing your subconscious mind to make connections and generate insights. But this process requires actual mental downtime, not just switching from one stimulus to another. Many people find that their best ideas emerge during activities that occupy the body but free the mind. Running, swimming, gardening, woodworking. These activities provide just enough engagement to prevent anxious rumination while allowing the mind to process and integrate information in the background. Building regular periods of unstimulated time into your life isn't about productivity per se. It's about maintaining the cognitive flexibility and creative capacity that enables your best work. It's about giving your brain the recovery it needs to function optimally. It's about resisting the cultural pressure to be constantly entertained, informed, and connected. This resistance to constant stimulation extends to how you spend your leisure time. Newport argues for what he calls high-quality leisure, activities that are active rather than passive, that build skills or connections, that provide genuine satisfaction rather than mere distraction. Reading books, playing musical instruments, engaging in sports or crafts, having extended conversations with friends. These activities provide real restoration because they engage your mind and body in ways that are fundamentally different from work. They also build capacities, focus, creativity, problem solving that transfer to your work life. Contrast this with passive consumption of social media or television, which provides minimal restoration and often leaves people feeling more depleted than before. The fundamental insight is this: protecting your attention isn't just about what you prevent during work hours. It's about how you structure your entire life to support the cognitive capacities required for deep work. Every choice you make about how you spend your time either strengthens or weakens your ability to focus. When you choose to check your phone during every idle moment, you weaken your focus capacity. When you choose to take a walk without devices, you strengthen it. When you choose to binge-watch television every evening, you weaken it. When you choose to read books or engage in active hobbies, you strengthen it. These aren't moral judgments. They're simple cause and effect. The cumulative impact of these choices determines whether you can access deep work and flow states or whether you remain trapped in shallow distraction. This is why protecting your attention requires more than just tactical defenses during work hours. It requires a comprehensive approach to how you relate to technology, stimulation, and your own mind. Chapter 5. Deliberate Practice and Skill Development. Understanding deep work and protecting your attention creates the foundation, but mastering flow states requires something more: deliberate practice. This concept, developed by psychologist Anders Ericsson through decades of research on expert performance, fundamentally changed how we understand skill development and achievement. Ericsson's research challenged the popular notion that exceptional performance results primarily from innate talent. Instead, he found that expert performers across diverse fields, from music to chess to sports to surgery, achieved their mastery through a specific type of practice he called deliberate practice. This practice is characterized by several key elements that distinguish it from mere repetition or casual engagement. First, deliberate practice focuses on skills just beyond your current level of competence. You're not practicing what you're already good at. You're working at the edge of your ability, in what psychologist Lev Vygotsky called the zone of proximal development, the sweet spot where challenge and skill align to enable growth. This is uncomfortable. When you're working at your edge, you make mistakes, you struggle, you experience the cognitive friction of trying to do something that's difficult for you. Many people avoid this discomfort, preferring to practice what they're already competent at because it feels good to execute skills smoothly. But this comfortable practice produces minimal improvement. Expert performers, by contrast, deliberately seek out their weaknesses and focus their practice on improving them. A pianist doesn't just play through pieces they've already mastered. They isolate the difficult passages that challenge them and work on those specifically. A chess player doesn't just play casual games. They study positions that expose gaps in their understanding. An athlete doesn't just compete. They drill specific skills that need improvement. Second, Deliberate practice requires full attention and conscious effort. You can't practice deliberately while distracted or on autopilot. This is where the connection to deep work becomes clear. Deliberate practice is a form of deep work, requiring sustained, focused attention on cognitively demanding tasks. Research shows that musicians can typically sustain only about 4 to 5 hours of truly deliberate practice per day before exhaustion sets in. Beginners might manage only 15 to 20 minutes of full concentration. The key insight is that the limiting factor isn't time but cognitive intensity. Deliberate practice is so mentally demanding that your brain can only handle it in limited doses. This has profound implications for how you approach skill development. Adding more hours of casual practice produces minimal returns. What matters is the quality and intensity of your practice during the limited time when you're capable of full focus. An hour of deliberate practice outweighs 10 hours of distracted repetition. Third, deliberate practice requires immediate feedback. You need to know whether what you're doing is correct, whether you're improving, whether your approach is effective. This feedback might come from a teacher or coach, from the task itself, or from careful self-monitoring. Expert performers develop sophisticated internal models that allow them to evaluate their own performance. A skilled writer can sense when a sentence isn't quite right. A master carpenter can feel when a joint isn't properly fitted. A chess grandmaster recognizes immediately when they've made a strategic error. This self-monitoring ability is itself a skill that develops through practice. When direct feedback isn't available, expert performers create systems to get it. They record themselves and analyze the recordings. They compare their work to exemplars. They seek critique from those more skilled. They develop metrics that reveal whether they're actually improving or just going through motions. Fourth, deliberate practice involves repetition with refinement. You don't just do something once and move on. You repeat it, incorporating feedback, making adjustments, experimenting with variations. Each repetition is slightly different, informed by what you learned from the previous attempt. This is where the neuroscience of myelination becomes relevant again. When you practice something with full attention, you're strengthening specific neural pathways. The more you activate these pathways through intense, focused repetition, the thicker the myelin sheath becomes, making those pathways progressively more efficient. But this only works with deliberate practice. Mindless repetition actually reinforces poor habits and can lead to what Erickson called arrested development, where you plateau rather than continuing to improve. This is why simply logging hours isn't enough. The quality of your attention during those hours determines whether you're actually building expertise. Fifth, deliberate practice is solitary. While coaching and collaboration have their place, the actual work of skill development happens when you're alone with the task, pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone without the social pressures or distractions that come with other people. Erickson found that the amount of solitary practice was one of the strongest predictors of performance level across multiple domains. Expert musicians spent significantly more time in solitary practice than less accomplished musicians. Elite chess players studied alone more than weaker players. Top performers in virtually every field prioritized individual practice over group activities. This doesn't mean social learning is worthless. Teachers provide guidance on what to practice and how. Peers offer motivation and perspective. Performance opportunities allow you to test your skills. But the core work of developing mastery happens in solitude, when you're free to focus entirely on the edge of your ability without external demands or distractions. The connection between deliberate practice and flow states is subtle but important. Deliberate practice and flow are not the same thing. In fact, they're somewhat in tension with each other. Deliberate practice is uncomfortable. You're struggling with material that challenges you. You're highly aware of your errors and limitations. This isn't the effortless absorption of flow state. Flow tends to occur when you're performing at or slightly above your current skill level, but not pushing significantly beyond it. When you're in flow, the task feels almost automatic. You're fully engaged, but not struggling. This is a beautiful state for performance, but it's not optimal for skill development. Here's the key insight. Deliberate practice builds the skills that allow you to experience flow at higher levels of difficulty. Every time you push yourself through deliberate practice, you're expanding the range of tasks that feel natural and effortless. What required intense deliberate practice last month might feel like flow today. Think of it like this. Deliberate practice is the valley between peaks. You descend into struggle and discomfort to build new capabilities. Then you ascend to a new peak where you can experience flow at a higher level than before. Elite performers continuously cycle between these states, using deliberate practice to expand their capabilities, then experiencing flow during performance or when working on material they've already mastered. This means that both deliberate practice and flow have their place in your development. You need periods of deliberate practice to actually improve your skills. You also need periods of flow to consolidate those skills, to experience the satisfaction of competent performance, to remind yourself why you're doing this difficult work. The mistake many people make is staying too long in either state. Some people remain perpetually in their comfort zone, experiencing frequent flow, but never actually improving. They practice what they're already good at because it feels good, avoiding the discomfort of working at their edge. Over time, they plateau, wondering why they're not getting better despite spending so much time practicing. Others fall into the opposite trap, constant grinding at the edge of their abilities without ever backing off to consolidate and enjoy their progress. This leads to burnout, frustration, and eventually abandonment of the practice entirely. You can't maintain maximum intensity indefinitely. The optimal approach is what we might call progressive overload with strategic recovery, a concept borrowed from physical training, but equally applicable to cognitive development. You push yourself with deliberate practice during limited, intense sessions. Then you back off, working on material that allows you to experience flow and consolidate your learning. Over time, you progressively increase the difficulty of what you're practicing, always maintaining that balance between challenge and recovery. This is where your deep work scheduling philosophy becomes crucial. If you're following a rhythmic approach, you might dedicate certain days or certain hours to deliberate practice, pushing yourself with difficult material. Other sessions might focus on application, where you use your developing skills in contexts that allow for flow. If you're following a bimodal approach, you might dedicate entire weeks to intensive skill development, working at your edge consistently. Then you take breaks where you apply those skills in ways that are challenging but not overwhelming, allowing you to experience flow and build confidence. The specific implementation matters less than the underlying principle. Your practice should include both struggle and flow, both challenge and consolidation, both pushing your limits and enjoying your current capabilities. This rhythmic oscillation between states is what enables continuous improvement without burnout. One practical framework for structuring this is what we might call the learn, apply, reflect cycle. During learning phases, you engage in deliberate practice, working on skills just beyond your current level with full focus and attention. During application phases, you use those developing skills in real contexts, seeking flow states where your abilities align well with the challenge. During reflection phases, you step back to analyze your progress, identify areas for improvement, and plan your next learning cycle. Many successful learners structure their days around this cycle. Mornings might be devoted to learning when cognitive resources are fresh, and you can sustain the intensity of deliberate practice. Afternoons might involve application, using your skills in ways that feel more natural and allow for flow. Evenings might include reflection, reviewing what you learned, identifying patterns, planning tomorrow's practice. This structure honors both the brain's need for intensity and its need for variety. Pure, deliberate practice all day would quickly lead to exhaustion. Pure flow all day would produce minimal improvement. The combination, cycling between different types of cognitive work, allows you to make consistent progress while maintaining sustainability. Another key insight from Erickson's work is the importance of mental representations. Expert performers develop sophisticated internal models of their domain that allow them to process information more effectively and respond more skillfully to complex situations. A chess grandmaster doesn't see individual pieces on a board. They see patterns, threats, opportunities, strategic configurations. A master chef doesn't think consciously about each ingredient and technique. They have integrated knowledge that allows them to taste a dish and immediately know what it needs. A skilled programmer doesn't laboriously construct each line of code. They recognize patterns and apply proven solutions fluidly. These mental representations are built through thousands of hours of deliberate practice. Each time you push yourself to understand something deeply, to struggle with a complex problem, to integrate new knowledge with existing knowledge, you're building more sophisticated mental models. This is why deliberate practice focused on understanding rather than mere performance is so powerful. When you practice with the goal of comprehending why something works, not just how to do it, you build mental representations that transfer to new situations. You're not just memorizing procedures. You're developing flexible understanding that allows for creative problem solving. This principle applies whether you're developing technical skills, creative abilities, or cognitive capacities. A writer who deliberately practices analyzing what makes prose effective develops better mental representations than someone who just writes without reflection. A manager who deliberately practices understanding team dynamics develops better mental representations than someone who just reacts to situations as they arise. The path to expertise, then, is not primarily about accumulating hours. It's about structuring those hours to maximize the development of mental representations through deliberate practice. It's about consistently working at the edge of your ability, getting immediate feedback, making adjustments, and repeating with full attention. This is hard work. There's no way around that. But understanding the process makes it less mysterious and more achievable. You're not waiting for inspiration or hoping for natural talent to manifest. You're systematically building skills through practices that align with how the brain actually learns and develops expertise. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more you develop your skills through deliberate practice, the more accessible flow states become. As your capabilities expand, you can experience flow during increasingly complex and meaningful activities. The struggling beginner experiences flow only during simple tasks. The developing practitioner experiences flow during moderately challenging work. The expert experiences flow while doing things that would utterly overwhelm the beginner. This is the deep work evolution. From shallow competence maintained through casual practice, to developing expertise through deliberate practice, to flow state mastery where your highest capabilities align with your most meaningful challenges. This is how you move from merely working hard to working with genuine excellence. Chapter 6. The Role of Environment and Systems. You are not a brain in a jar, making decisions and performing work through pure force of will. You are an embodied being whose capacity for focus, creativity, and flow is profoundly influenced by your physical environment and the systems you build around your work. Understanding this isn't about making excuses for poor performance. It's about recognizing that environment and systems can either support or sabotage your deep work practice. Let's start with your physical workspace. Research consistently shows that environmental factors significantly impact cognitive performance. Temperature, lighting, noise levels, spatial organization All of these affect your brain's ability to function optimally. Temperature matters more than most people realize. Studies indicate that cognitive performance peaks in environments around 68 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. When you're too warm, your body diverts resources to cooling, reducing what's available for thinking. When you're too cold, you're distracted by discomfort. The ideal is slightly cool, enough to keep you alert without being uncomfortable. Lighting has profound effects on both performance and well-being. Natural light is ideal, helping regulate your circadian rhythm and improving both cognitive function and mood. When natural light isn't available, cool-toned artificial light that mimics daylight works better than warm-toned light for focus and alertness. Conversely, warm-toned light in the evening helps signal to your brain that it's time to wind down. Blue light from screens deserves special attention. Exposure to blue light suppresses melatonin production, which is helpful during the day but destructive at night. If you work on screens in the evening, using blue light filters or transitioning to non-screen activities a few hours before bed significantly improves sleep quality, which in turn affects your cognitive performance the next day. Noise presents a complex challenge. Complete silence works well for some people, but creates a kind of acoustic hypersensitivity for others, where every small sound becomes distracting. Moderate background noise, around 70 decibels, roughly the level of a coffee shop, can actually enhance creative thinking for many people by providing acoustic masking without being loud enough to distract. The key is consistency and control. Unpredictable or intermittent noise is far more distracting than steady background sound. This is why sudden noises in a quiet office can completely shatter focus, while consistent ambient noise might barely register. If you work in a noisy environment, noise-canceling headphones or white noise can create the consistency your brain needs. Music affects focus in complex ways that vary by individual and task. For tasks requiring intense concentration on language or complex reasoning, complete silence or instrumental music without lyrics typically works best. For more routine tasks or creative work, some people find that familiar music enhances their focus by creating a pleasant acoustic environment. The research suggests that music around 50 to 80 beats per minute can improve concentration by increasing heart rate and arousal to optimal levels. Classical music, particularly Baroque compositions, often falls in this range. However, the most important factor is familiarity. Novel or attention-grabbing music disrupts focus, while music you know well can fade into the background. Beyond these environmental factors, the physical organization of your workspace profoundly impacts your ability to maintain focus. Visual clutter creates cognitive load. When your workspace is filled with papers, objects, and visual noise, your brain allocates processing resources to managing that clutter, leaving less available for your actual work. The solution isn't rigid minimalism. It's intentional organization. Everything in your workspace should either serve your current work or be stored out of sight. Before each deep work session, take a minute to clear your desk of anything that's not immediately relevant. This simple ritual signals to your brain that it's time to focus and eliminates potential sources of distraction. Your posture and physical setup also matter. Ergonomic workstation design isn't just about preventing injury. It's about reducing physical discomfort that can distract from cognitive work. Your monitor should be at eye level. Your chair should support your lower back. Your keyboard and mouse should allow for neutral wrist positions. When your body is comfortable, your mind is free to focus on your work. Some people discover they think better standing or walking. Walking meetings, standing desks, even treadmill desks can provide the physical engagement that helps some brains maintain focus. The key is experimentation. What works for someone else might not work for you. Pay attention to when you feel most focused and try to identify the physical factors that support that state. Now let's move from physical environment to systems. Your capacity for deep work isn't just about individual willpower. It's about the systems you build to support your practice. Systems conserve willpower by making good choices automatic. They eliminate decision fatigue by creating clear protocols for recurring situations. Consider your calendar. For most people, their calendar is a reactive document, filling up with meetings and obligations that others impose. For deep workers, the calendar should be a proactive tool for protecting focus time. This means scheduling your deep work blocks before other commitments fill your calendar. It means treating these blocks as seriously as you would treat important client meetings. One powerful system is time blocking, where you plan your entire workday in advance, assigning specific blocks of time to specific types of work. Deep work blocks get protected time. Administrative tasks get batched into dedicated periods. Meetings get scheduled strategically rather than scattered throughout the day. This level of planning might seem rigid, but it actually creates freedom. When you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing during each block of time, you eliminate the constant low-level anxiety of wondering what you should be working on. You eliminate the temptation to work on whatever feels most urgent in the moment, rather than what's actually most important. Your task management system matters too. David Allen's Getting Things Done methodology provides excellent guidance here. The core insight is that your brain is terrible at storing information, but excellent at processing it. When you try to remember everything you need to do, you waste cognitive resources on storage that should be devoted to actual thinking. The solution is an external system you trust completely. Everything you need to remember goes into this system. Every task, every project, every idea that requires future action. Once it's in the system, your brain can let go of it, freeing that mental space for deep work. This system should have a few key components. A capture mechanism for quickly recording anything that comes up. A processing routine for regularly reviewing what you've captured and deciding what to do with it. An organizational structure that makes it easy to find what you need when you need it. And most importantly, a weekly review where you step back to ensure your system reflects your current priorities and commitments. Many people resist this level of system building, feeling it's too structured or bureaucratic. But the paradox is that good systems actually create more spontaneity and creativity, not less. When you trust your system to remember everything, when you know your important work is protected on your calendar, when you have clear protocols for handling routine situations, your mind is free to be creative in the moments that matter. Your communication protocols form another crucial system. Every interruption, every message, every request for your attention potentially fragments your focus. Without clear protocols, you're at the mercy of other people's urgency. Effective communication protocols specify when and how you'll be available for different types of communication. You might check email only at specific times. You might use different channels for different urgency levels. You might set up autoresponders that explain your communication practices and provide alternative channels for urgent issues. The key is communicating these protocols clearly to the people who need to reach you. When colleagues and clients understand that you check email twice daily, but respond to urgent texts immediately, they adjust their behavior accordingly. When they know you're in deep work mode between 9 and noon, but available for calls in the afternoon, they respect those boundaries. Some people worry that these protocols make them seem unresponsive or difficult to work with. In practice, the opposite is true. When you respond to messages during scheduled times, you're typically more thoughtful and helpful than when you're responding reactively throughout the day. When people know when to expect responses, they're less anxious about delays. Your energy management system is equally important. Deep work requires significant cognitive resources. If you try to do deep work when you're exhausted, hungry, or physically depleted, you'll struggle regardless of your environment or techniques. This means paying attention to your ultradian rhythms, the roughly 90-minute cycles of alertness and fatigue your body naturally follows. Most people can sustain peak cognitive intensity for about 90 minutes before needing a break. Structuring your deep work in 90-minute blocks with real breaks in between honors this natural rhythm. Breaks need to be actual recovery periods, not just switching to different work. Getting up from your desk, moving your body, looking at distant objects to rest your eyes, giving your mind a complete break from problem solving. These practices allow your brain to recover and prepare for the next deep work session. Your nutrition affects cognitive performance more than most people realize. The brain consumes about 20% of your body's energy, despite being only 2% of your body weight. When blood sugar crashes, so does cognitive performance. Eating regularly, choosing foods that provide steady energy rather than sugar spikes and crashes, staying hydrated. These basic practices significantly impact your capacity for deep work. Sleep is non-negotiable. When you're sleep deprived, your cognitive performance degrades dramatically. Research shows that being awake for 19 hours produces impairment equivalent to being legally drunk. Yet, many people routinely shortchange their sleep, thinking they're being productive, when actually they're undermining their capacity for the deep work that matters most. The systems you build around sleep, nutrition, and energy management aren't separate from your deep work practice. They're fundamental to it. You can have perfect techniques and ideal environments, but if you're exhausted, poorly nourished, and running on caffeine rather than sleep, won't achieve the cognitive states where deep work happens. Building effective systems requires honest self-knowledge. You need to understand your own patterns. When you're most alert, what drains your energy, how you naturally prefer to work. Some people are morning larks, capable of intense focus at dawn, but fading in the afternoon. Others are night owls, coming alive in the evening. Fighting your natural chronotype is a losing battle. The same applies to the work preferences. Some people need absolute silence. Others work better with background noise. Some prefer intensive bursts with long breaks. Others maintain steady focus for extended periods. There's no universal right answer. What matters is understanding what works for you and building systems that support, rather than fight your natural inclinations. This self-knowledge develops through experimentation and reflection. Keep notes on when you feel most focused. Track which environmental factors seem to support or hinder your work. Notice what helps you recover energy and what depletes it. Over time, patterns emerge that allow you to optimize your environment and systems for your specific needs. One powerful practice is conducting regular reviews at multiple timescales. Daily shutdown rituals review the day's work and plan tomorrow. Weekly reviews step back to assess progress on larger projects and ensure your systems are working. Monthly reviews examine whether you're focusing on the right work and making meaningful progress toward important goals. Annual reviews evaluate whether your work aligns with your values and long-term aspirations. These reviews serve multiple functions. They ensure nothing falls through the cracks. They provide perspective on whether you're actually making progress or just staying busy. They create space for course corrections before small misalignments become major problems. Perhaps most importantly, they give you a sense of control and intentionality in a world that constantly pushes you toward reactive busyness. The environment and systems you build around your deep work practice aren't peripheral concerns. They're fundamental to success. Will alone is insufficient. You need external structures that support your internal intentions, that make deep work the path of least resistance, rather than a constant battle against default patterns. This is why seemingly successful people often have elaborate routines and systems that might seem excessive to outside observers. They're not being rigid or controlling. They're creating the conditions where their best work can emerge consistently rather than occasionally. They're recognizing that environment and systems profoundly influence performance and choosing to design those factors intentionally. Your task is to become the architect of your own optimal conditions for deep work. This means experimenting systematically with different environmental factors, building systems that support your practice, and continuously refining your approach based on actual results rather than theoretical ideals. It means being honest about what actually works rather than what you think should work. The goal isn't perfection, it's progressive optimization. Each small improvement to your environment or systems compounds over time. What seems like a minor adjustment, eliminating one source of distraction or building one helpful protocol, can have outsized effects on your capacity for deep work over months and years. Chapter 7. The Path to Flow State Mastery. We've covered the foundations: understanding deep work, protecting your attention, deliberate practice, environment, and systems. Now we can address what this has all been building toward: achieving consistent access to flow states. Those peak experiences of complete absorption where your best work emerges with seemingly effortless intensity. Flow state mastery isn't about occasionally stumbling into flow by accident. It's about understanding the conditions that produce flow and systematically creating those conditions in your life and work. It's about building the skills and capacities that allow you to access flow at will when working on your most important challenges. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi spent decades researching flow, interviewing thousands of people across diverse fields about their peak experiences. His research identified consistent characteristics of flow states and the conditions that enable them. Understanding these patterns transforms flow from mysterious magic into achievable practice. Flow states share several core characteristics. First, there's complete concentration on the task at hand. Your attention is fully absorbed. You're not thinking about anything else. You're not monitoring yourself or worrying about outcomes. You're completely present with what you're doing. Second, there's a merging of action and awareness. The distinction between you and the activity dissolves. You're not someone playing an instrument. You are the music. You're not someone solving a problem. You are the problem-solving process itself. This is what people mean when they talk about being in the zone. Third, there's a loss of reflective self-consciousness. The critical voice that usually monitors your performance falls silent. You're not worried about how you look or whether you're doing it right. You're fully engaged in the doing without self-judgment. Fourth, there's a sense that you're in control of the situation. Not in the sense of forcing or manipulating, but in the sense of responding skillfully to whatever arises. You trust your abilities. You feel capable. The challenge feels manageable, even when it's difficult. Fifth, time perception changes. Hours feel like minutes. Or sometimes the opposite. Minutes feel expanded, containing far more than they normally would. You lose track of clock time, becoming absorbed in the intrinsic time of the activity itself. Sixth, the activity becomes intrinsically rewarding. You're not doing it for some external reward or outcome. The doing itself is the reward. This doesn't mean flow only happens during leisure activities. People experience flow at work when conditions align properly. These characteristics emerge reliably when certain conditions are met. The challenge-skills balance is crucial. Flow occurs when the difficulty of a task stretches you just beyond your current abilities without overwhelming you. Too easy, and you're bored. Too hard, and you're anxious. The flow channel exists in that narrow band where challenge and skill align. This creates an interesting dynamic. As your skills improve, you need progressively more difficult challenges to experience flow. What induced flow last month might feel routine today. This is why people who regularly experience flow tend to continuously seek new challenges. They're not driven by external achievement per se. They're seeking the experience of flow at progressively higher levels of skill. Clear goals and immediate feedback are essential. Your brain needs to know what it's trying to accomplish and whether it's succeeding. This feedback might be obvious, like a basketball going through the hoop or a program running correctly. Or it might be subtle, like the feel of words coming together in writing, or the sense that a design is working. The key is that the activity itself provides feedback. You don't need someone else to tell you how you're doing. You can sense it directly through engagement with the task. This is why activities with ambiguous goals or delayed feedback are harder to experience flow in. The activity must fully engage your attention without distractions. This is why flow is so rare in modern environments filled with interruptions. Every notification, every interruption, every divided attention destroys the complete absorption necessary for flow. With these conditions understood, how do you actually cultivate flow states? The foundation is everything we've already covered: protecting attention, building skills through deliberate practice, creating supportive environments and systems. But there are specific practices that help you access flow more reliably. First, prepare properly before attempting deep work. Many people try to jump directly from distracted shallow work into deep focus, then wonder why they struggle. Your brain needs transition time. Elite performers have pre-performance routines that signal to their brain it's time for peak performance. You need similar routines for deep work. This might be as simple as making tea and sitting in your designated workspace, or as elaborate as a specific sequence of stretches, breathing exercises, and mental preparation. The specifics matter less than consistency. When you always prepare the same way, your brain learns to associate these cues with focused work, making the transition progressively easier. Second, start each deep work session with clear intentions. What specifically are you trying to accomplish? What would success look like? How will you know whether you're making progress? These questions focus your mind and provide the clear goals necessary for flow. This doesn't mean rigidly planning every detail. It means having enough clarity about direction that you can recognize whether you're moving toward your goal. The work itself might evolve as you engage with it, but you need a starting point. Third, eliminate all unnecessary decisions during deep work sessions. Every decision, no matter how small, consumes cognitive resources. Successful deep workers create systems that minimize decisions. They work in the same place, use the same tools, follow the same protocols. This conserves mental energy for the work itself. Fourth, match the difficulty of your work to your current state. Some days, you're sharp, energized, capable of tackling your most challenging problems. Other days, you're tired, distracted, barely holding it together. Trying to force difficult work when you're depleted leads to frustration and failure. Instead, maintain a range of meaningful tasks at different difficulty levels. When you're at your peak, tackle the most challenging work. When you're depleted, work on important but less demanding tasks. This honors both the reality of fluctuating energy and the importance of making progress even on difficult days. Fifth, allow time for your brain to warm up to difficult tasks. Flow rarely happens instantly. There's typically a period of struggle, of getting oriented to the problem, of building momentum. Many people give up during this initial period, thinking that if flow isn't immediate, it won't come. In reality, 15 to 20 minutes of focused engagement often precedes entry into flow states. If you switch tasks every 10 minutes, you'll never reach the states where flow emerges. You need patience with the warm-up period. Trust that if you maintain focus, flow will likely follow. Sixth, use strategies to deepen focus when you notice your attention wandering. This might be as simple as pausing, taking 3 deep breaths, and returning to the task. Or it might involve physically changing position, standing up briefly, then re-engaging. Small reset actions can prevent minor attention lapses from cascading into full distraction. 7th, respect your limits. Flow is sustainable only when balanced with adequate rest and recovery. Trying to force flow when you're genuinely exhausted doesn't work and risks burnout. Better to acknowledge your current state, work on easier tasks or rest completely, and return to challenging work when you're restored. 8th, cultivate what we might call flow literacy, the ability to recognize and work with different mental states. Some days, your mind is sharp and focused, perfect for analytical work. Other days, it's more diffuse and creative, better suited for brainstorming and synthesis. Instead of fighting your current state, work with it, choosing tasks that align with your natural rhythms. 9th, build in recovery practices that support your capacity for flow. This includes physical practices like exercise, which improves both cognitive function and stress resilience. It includes restorative practices like meditation, which strengthens your capacity for sustained attention. It includes social practices like meaningful conversations, which provide perspective and emotional support. 10th, embrace the struggle that precedes breakthroughs. Flow doesn't mean work is always easy. Some of the deepest flow experiences come after extended periods of struggle with difficult problems. The key is distinguishing between productive struggle and counterproductive spinning. Productive struggle maintains engagement even when frustrated. Counterproductive spinning loses focus and becomes anxious circling. The research on expertise provides crucial insights here. Expert performers regularly experience what researchers call effortful engagement, a state that combines intense focus with significant cognitive load. This isn't the effortless flow of peak performance. It's the demanding work of pushing beyond current capabilities. The progression typically looks like this. You encounter a problem at the edge of your abilities. You engage with full focus, experiencing productive struggle. Through sustained effort, you develop new understanding or capabilities. What was previously at your edge becomes comfortable. This opens up new, more difficult challenges that you can now access. These new challenges become the focus of your deliberate practice. Over time, you can experience flow during activities that would have overwhelmed you months or years earlier. This is deep work evolution in action. You're not just trying to access flow states at your current level. You're systematically expanding your capabilities so you can experience flow while doing increasingly meaningful and complex work. You're building the skills, the focus capacity, the mental representations that allow you to engage with challenges that matter. One powerful practice for accelerating this evolution is what we might call deliberate reflection. After each deep work session, take a few minutes to review. What went well? Where did you struggle? When did you feel most focused? What distracted you? What would you do differently next time? This reflection serves multiple purposes. It consolidates learning from the session. It provides data for optimizing your practice. It helps you recognize patterns in your focus and performance. Over time, this accumulated self-knowledge allows you to design increasingly effective deep work sessions. Another accelerator is seeking out progressively challenging problems. Many people plateau because they continue working on problems at their current comfort level. Real growth requires regularly tackling problems that are genuinely difficult for you, that push you beyond what you confidently know how to do. This is uncomfortable. Nobody likes feeling incompetent. But this discomfort is the price of growth. Every expert was once a beginner feeling overwhelmed by what's now routine for them. The only way through is consistent engagement with challenges just beyond your current edge. Community can support this journey, even though the actual work of deep focus is solitary. Connecting with others pursuing similar paths provides motivation, accountability, and learning. You might join or create a group of people committed to deep work, sharing practices and supporting each other's growth. This community doesn't need to be large or formal. Even one or two people who understand what you're trying to accomplish can provide enormous support. They remind you of your intentions when you're tempted to revert to shallow habits. They celebrate your progress when you're too close to see it. They offer perspective when you're stuck. The path to flow state mastery is not linear. You'll have periods of rapid progress and frustrating plateaus. You'll have days when focus comes easily and days when you can barely maintain attention for 10 minutes. This variability is normal. What matters is the long-term trend, the gradual expansion of your capabilities over months and years. This is why measurement and tracking matter. Not obsessively, but enough to see patterns. You might track how many deep work hours you achieve each week, or rate the quality of your focus on a simple scale. Or note which conditions seemed to support or hinder your practice. Small amounts of data, reviewed periodically, reveal progress you might not otherwise notice. Ultimately, flow state mastery isn't an arrival point. It's a continuous practice of creating conditions for flow, building skills that support flow, and engaging with challenges that invite flow. The goal isn't to live in flow constantly. That's neither possible nor desirable. The goal is to access flow reliably when working on your most important challenges, to experience it with increasing frequency and depth as your capabilities expand. This mastery transforms your relationship with work itself. Instead of work being something you force yourself through, it becomes a source of genuine engagement and satisfaction. Instead of measuring success by hours logged or tasks completed, you measure it by the quality of your attention and the depth of your engagement. Instead of feeling perpetually busy, yet unsatisfied, you experience the profound fulfillment that comes from meaningful work done with complete focus. This is what's possible when you commit to deep work evolution. Not just incremental improvements in productivity, but a fundamental transformation in the quality of your work and the satisfaction you derive from it. This is how you move from shallow existence to deep living, from scattered attention to focused presence, from surface productivity to flow state mastery. Chapter 8. Living the Deep Life. Deep work isn't just a technique you apply at the office. It's a philosophy of life, a comprehensive approach to how you spend your time, direct your attention, and pursue what matters to you. Living the deep life means making choices about technology, relationships, leisure, and values that support your capacity for depth rather than fragment it. Cal Newport describes this broader philosophy as digital minimalism, a carefully curated relationship with technology where you focus on a small number of tools that genuinely support your values and happily miss out on everything else. This isn't about rejecting all technology. It's about being intentional rather than reactive, choosing tools that serve you rather than letting tools use you. The foundation of digital minimalism is recognizing that technology companies have sophisticated financial incentives to capture and hold your attention. Every app, every platform, every device is designed to maximize engagement, which really means maximizing the time you spend using it. The business model of social media, for instance, depends on keeping you scrolling, clicking, reacting. This isn't conspiracy theory, it's simple economics. These companies sell advertising, and advertising revenue depends on attention. The more time you spend on their platforms, the more ads they can show you, the more money they make. Every feature is optimized toward this goal. The algorithms that determine what you see, the notifications that pull you back, the social dynamics that create fear of missing out, all of this is engineered to be psychologically compelling. Understanding this doesn't require moral judgment. The people designing these systems aren't evil. They're responding to incentive structures. But recognizing how these systems work allows you to make conscious choices about your relationship with them rather than being unconsciously manipulated. The digital minimalism approach involves a radical reset called a digital declutter. For 30 days, you take a break from all optional technologies in your life: social media, entertainment websites, gaming apps, news sites, anything you use for distraction or entertainment rather than necessity. You keep technologies essential for work or important relationships, but you eliminate everything else. This isn't a permanent abandonment. It's a pause that allows you to rediscover what matters to you, independent of digital entertainment. During these 30 days, you actively explore offline activities that might be satisfying: reading books, engaging in hobbies, spending time in nature, having long conversations with friends, pursuing physical activities. Many people resist this idea because they can't imagine what they'd do with all that free time. This resistance itself is revealing. It shows how thoroughly digital entertainment has colonized leisure time, leaving little space for anything else. The digital declutter creates space to remember or discover activities that are genuinely satisfying rather than merely distracting. After 30 days, you selectively reintroduce technologies, but only ones that pass 3 tests. Does this technology support something I deeply value? Is this the best way to support this value? How will I use this technology to maximize benefits and minimize harms? These questions force intentionality. You're not adopting technologies because they offer any potential benefit or because everyone else uses them. You're choosing only technologies that genuinely serve your values and using them in carefully defined ways. For example, you might value staying informed about current events. But does this require checking news sites multiple times daily, scrolling through social media feeds, and consuming every breaking story? Or could you read a well-curated weekly publication that provides thoughtful analysis? The second approach supports the value of being informed while consuming far less time and attention. Similarly, you might value maintaining friendships. But does this require being on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, constantly scrolling through updates and liking posts? Or could you maintain meaningful friendships through regular phone calls, occasional in-person meetings, and intentional correspondence? The second approach actually deepens relationships, rather than replacing depth with superficial digital interaction. The digital minimalism framework extends beyond specific technologies to how you structure your entire relationship with digital entertainment and distraction. It means recognizing that the internet, social media, and digital devices can provide value, but only when used intentionally rather than as default time fillers. This brings us to what Newport calls high-quality leisure, activities that require active engagement rather than passive consumption. Reading books rather than scrolling social media, playing musical instruments rather than streaming music, engaging in sports or crafts rather than watching television, having extended conversations with friends rather than exchanging quick messages. These high-quality leisure activities provide genuine restoration because they engage different parts of your brain than your work does. They build skills, create connections, generate satisfaction. They leave you feeling refreshed rather than depleted. Contrast this with low-quality leisure, mindlessly scrolling social media, binging television shows, playing addictive mobile games. These activities provide temporary distraction, but leave you feeling drained. They're the mental equivalent of junk food, offering quick satisfaction followed by a crash. The challenge is that low-quality leisure is easier in the moment. After a long day of work, collapsing on the couch with Netflix feels easier than going for a run or calling a friend. High-quality leisure requires initial activation energy, but once you're engaged, it's far more satisfying and restorative. Building a deep life means consciously choosing high-quality leisure despite the easy appeal of distraction. It means having specific activities planned for your free time rather than defaulting to whatever's most convenient. It means treating leisure as valuable rather than as mere recovery from work. This connects to what Newport calls solitude, which doesn't mean physical isolation. It means time alone with your thoughts, free from input from other minds. In our hyperconnected world, many people go weeks or months without genuine solitude. Every moment of potential aloneness gets filled with podcasts, audiobooks, social media, or messages. This solitude deprivation has serious consequences. Your brain needs time to process information, to integrate experiences, to work through problems without external input. When you're constantly consuming other people's thoughts, you never develop your own. You lose touch with your internal experience, your values, your authentic responses to situations. Regular solitude is essential for deep work and flow states. It's also essential for mental health, creativity, and personal growth. This means deliberately creating time without any input, walking without headphones, sitting without devices, driving without radio or podcasts, just being with your own thoughts. Initially, this might feel uncomfortable. Your mind might race or feel restless, but over time, you redevelop the capacity to be comfortable with yourself, to think through problems without external stimulus, to access the deeper parts of your consciousness that only emerge in solitude. Living the deep life also means reconsidering your relationship with work itself. The modern knowledge economy rewards busyness, responsiveness, and visible activity. Being the person who responds to emails instantly, who's always available for meetings, who's seen working late, often feels like the path to success. But research consistently shows that the most valuable knowledge workers aren't the most responsive. They're the ones who produce the highest quality output through deep work. They're the ones who have the courage to protect their attention, even when it means being less immediately available. This requires what Newport calls the courage to be boring. You're not attending every networking event. You're not active on every social platform. You're not immediately responsive to every message. From the outside, you might seem less engaged, less connected, less exciting. But this apparent boringness creates space for depth. While others are scattered across multiple shallow engagements, you're going deep on work that matters. While others are constantly reacting, you're creating value that can't be replicated. While others are busy, you're productive. This often requires career capital, the skills and reputation that give you leverage to set your own terms. Early in your career, you might have less autonomy to protect your attention. But as you build valuable skills through deep work, you gain the leverage to demand better working conditions. The paradox is that deep work builds career capital faster than shallow work. Every hour of focused engagement with challenging problems develops skills and produces output that advances your career. While scattered work might create the appearance of productivity, deep work creates actual value. Living the deep life means making conscious choices about what you pursue and what you ignore. In a world of infinite possibility, where you could learn anything, pursue any interest, connect with anyone, the most scarce resource is focused attention. Every yes to one pursuit is an implicit no to countless others. Many people resist this necessary saying no because they fear missing out on opportunities, relationships, or experiences. But the attempt to do everything leads to doing nothing well. Better to do a few things with genuine depth than many things superficially. This principle of less but better applies across domains. Fewer but deeper friendships rather than hundreds of superficial connections. Fewer but more challenging projects rather than many shallow tasks. Fewer but richer experiences rather than constant novelty. This isn't about deprivation. It's about recognizing that depth provides more satisfaction than breadth. A single deep friendship offers more value than 50 acquaintances. One project pursued with full engagement provides more meaning than 10 projects you barely care about. One skill developed to high levels creates more opportunity than 10 skills you're merely competent at. Living the deep life also requires rethinking success itself. The dominant cultural narrative equates success with accumulation. More money, more recognition, more achievements, more experiences. But research on happiness and meaning consistently shows that beyond a certain threshold of material comfort, further accumulation adds little to well-being. What does contribute to lasting satisfaction is what we might call depth dimensions. The quality of your relationships, the meaningfulness of your work, the development of your capabilities, the alignment between your actions and your values. These dimensions all require sustained attention and cannot be achieved through scattered effort. This suggests a different definition of success, a life characterized by deep work, deep relationships, deep engagement with meaningful pursuits. This is harder to measure than conventional success metrics. You can't easily quantify the quality of your focus or the depth of your relationships. But these immeasurable qualities ultimately determine the texture of your lived experience. Living the deep life means consciously designing your life around these depth dimensions, rather than defaulting to cultural narratives about success. It means asking regularly, am I spending my time on what matters? Is my work aligned with my values? Are my relationships genuine and nourishing? Am I developing my capabilities or coasting on current competence? These questions require solitude to answer honestly. They require stepping back from the busy surface of life to examine the underlying patterns. They require the courage to acknowledge when you're drifting away from depth and make course corrections. This is why the practices we've explored, deep work, deliberate practice, flow states, aren't just professional development tools. They're practices for living well, for creating a life characterized by engagement, growth, and meaning rather than distraction, stagnation, and busyness. The journey to flow state mastery is simultaneously a journey toward a deeper life. As you develop your capacity for sustained attention, you become capable of deeper relationships, richer experiences, and more meaningful contributions. As you eliminate shallow distractions, you create space for what genuinely matters. As you build skills through deliberate practice, you expand what's possible in your life. This isn't easy. Our entire culture pushes toward shallow living, toward constant connectivity, toward the appearance of busyness over the reality of depth. Swimming against this current requires sustained effort and clear intention. But the alternative, a life lived mostly in distraction, never quite present, never quite focused, never quite satisfied, is far worse. The deep life isn't about perfection. You'll have days when you're scattered and distracted. You'll make choices you regret. You'll waste time on shallow pursuits. What matters is the overall direction, the commitment to returning again and again to depth, the refusal to accept scattered attention as an inevitable feature of modern life. Every choice you make either moves you toward depth or away from it. Every time you protect your focus, you're choosing depth. Every time you engage in deliberate practice, you're choosing depth. Every time you select high-quality leisure over distraction, you're choosing depth. These choices compound over time, shaping not just your productivity, but your entire experience of being alive. This is the ultimate promise of deep work evolution. Not just better work outcomes, but a better life. Not just more productivity, but more meaning. Not just greater achievement, but greater satisfaction. Not just flow states during work, but a sense of flow in your life itself, where who you are, what you do, and what you value limen in coherent purpose. You've reached the end of this exploration, but the beginning of your practice. Everything you've learned here means nothing without action. Knowledge about deep work doesn't change your life. Actually doing deep work changes your life. So let me ask you directly, what's the one change you'll make tomorrow? Not someday. Not when conditions are perfect. Tomorrow. Will you schedule your first deep work block on your calendar and defend it as you would defend the most important meeting of your life? Will you turn off all notifications for a single hour and see what becomes possible in that protected time? Will you identify the biggest distraction in your work life and create a specific plan to address it? Start small, but start immediately. 1 hour of genuine deep work is infinitely more valuable than planning to do deep work someday. The path to mastery begins with a single focused session, followed by another, then another, gradually building the practice that transforms your work and your life. The world needs what you can create when you work with complete focus and genuine excellence. The work you're capable of when you access flow states isn't just incrementally better than your distracted work. It's categorically different, producing insights and value that simply cannot emerge from fractured attention. But this potential remains locked unless you make the choice every day to protect your attention and engage deeply with work that matters. The distractions will always be there. The interruptions will never stop. The easy path of shallow work will always beckon. Your task is to build a practice strong enough to resist these forces, a commitment deep enough to persist despite obstacles, and a vision clear enough to remember why depth matters when everything around you celebrates surface-level busyness. This is your evolution. From shallow to deep, from scattered to focused, from busy to productive, from distracted to absorbed, from mediocre to excellent. Not because you're trying to impress anyone or achieve some external standard, but because you've experienced the profound satisfaction that comes from complete engagement with meaningful work. Take what you've learned here and put it into practice. Not perfectly, not all at once, but consistently, persistently, with growing skill and deepening focus. This is how mastery develops. This is how lives transform. This is how you move from merely working to experiencing the flow states where your best work emerges. Your deep work evolution begins now. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. What will you do with this moment? If you found value in this audiobook, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the Emberly Audiobook channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. What resonated with you? What will you implement first? Your insights might inspire someone else on their journey to flow state mastery. Remember, the path to extraordinary work isn't about working more hours. It's about working with complete focus during the hours that matter. It's about protecting your attention like the precious resource it is. It's about building the skills and practices that allow you to access flow states where your most meaningful contributions emerge. The world is drowning in shallow work. Be different. Go deep. The quality of your attention determines the quality of your life. Choose depth.